What if I told you that that's stubborn fat around your waistline isn't actually a sign of a slow metabolism?
Right.
Like, what if it's a desperate biological defense mechanism trying to save you from being poisoned?
It is such a wild concept, honestly. And welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Yes, welcome. Today's mission is going to completely shatter how you view your own biology. We are pulling apart this really incredible article by Dr. Karina
It's
Yankelovich.
from the Morrell Institute for Anti-Aging Medicine in New Jersey.
Exactly, and the title just throws down the gauntlet immediately. It's called Belly Fat is Not Just Fat.
Which is such an important distinction, because the overarching goal for you today is to stop looking at abdominal fat as just, a cosmetic annoyance.
Right, or a passive consequence of a few too many dinners out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to start understanding it as a highly active, highly disruptive biological system. And more importantly, we're going to walk through the clinical science of how to dismantle it safely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to figure out how to fix a problem, we first have to agree on what the problem actually is.
Right, for sure.
And the traditional, culturally ingrained narrative of weight gain is basically just a math equation.
The old calories in, calories out.
Right. You eat fewer calories, you move around more, the storage unit empties out, and everything just magically balances.
Yeah, but according to Dr. Yankelovich and, well, the current medical literature in general, that model is fundamentally broken.
Completely broken.
Because that math equation ignores anatomy completely. We have to draw a hard line between subcutaneous fat, which is that soft, pinchable layer right under your skin,
Right.
and visceral fat. Visceral abdominal fat sits deep inside your abdominal cavity.
Like literally wrapping around your organs.
Exactly. It physically wraps around your liver, your stomach, your intestines. And the medical consensus now classifies this specific deep fat not as a storage unit, but as an active endocrine organ.
An endocrine organ.
Oh, so.
So we're putting belly fat in the same functional category as like your thyroid or your adrenal gland?
Right. Yeah, or your pancreas. That is the paradigm shift here. It's not just sitting there holding extra energy. Visceral fat is constantly manufacturing and secreting highly potent biochemicals.
Wow. So if I'm visualizing this, we used to think of belly fat as a passive storage closet. You toss some extra calorie boxes in there, shut the door, and deal with it after the holidays.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind.
But it's actually more like a rogue factory.
Yeah.
It's operating 24/7, continuously pumping out chemical signals that travel through the bloodstream and just hijack the rest of the body.
That's a great analogy. And what's fascinating here is the sheer volume of what it produces. We are looking at free fatty acids, inflammatory cytokines, and adipokines.
Just a constant stream of them.
Yes. And because of where this fat is located deep in the abdomen, it has direct access to the portal vein.
Meaning it goes straight to the liver.
Exactly. It is pumping these chemicals straight into your liver and your systemic circulation. And the primary product rolling off that rogue factory's assembly line is inflammation.
Which is wild to think about. Your fat is literally creating inflammation.
Yeah, let's look at cytokines, for example. In a healthy immune response, cytokines are essentially chemical text messages. They tell your immune system to send help to a localized injury.
Like if you cut your finger.
Right. But visceral fat mass produces specific inflammatory cytokines that broadcast a systemic panic text to your entire body.
Oh, wow.
This chronic, low-grade inflammation is the exact biological bridge linking central fat to major cardiovascular and metabolic diseases.
So it's actively degrading your tissues over time.
It physically degrades them, yes.
And this whole approach to understanding the root cause is really interesting because the traditional medical route is often just wait until the damage is done, right?
Right. Wait until you can see it on a scan. I mean, look at places like the Princeton Institute for Longevity.
Sure.
They do incredible work, obviously, but they are really focused on diagnosing issues. Finding the plaques or the tumors on an MRI after they've already formed.
Right, diagnosing the aftermath.
Exactly. But what the source points out is that the Morrell Institute is really positioned at that same elite level, if not a step above, because they are entirely focused on treating and preventing the root problems before they ever show up on a scan.
Oh, that's a huge distinction. Catching the rogue factory before it burns the building down.
Precisely. They use advanced tools like the Gallery and Shield early detection DNA testing.
DNA testing for early detection.
Yeah, and true diagnostics. Plus things like doctor's data salivary hormone testing. It's incredibly specialized. And the key is they do it without MRI and X-ray radiation.
Oh, wow. So you get all this deep data without subjecting your body to radiation.
Yeah, exactly.
Which brings us back to the damage this rogue factory is doing. Because a massive downstream problem of this inflammation is the communication breakdown.
Yes, the biological static.
If this factory is constantly sending out inflammatory panic text, it starts to sabotage the body's normal internal communication lines. And it looks like the first major casualty of this is insulin.
Let's trace how that happens at the cellular level, because it's fascinating. Insulin is a hormone that acts like a key, unlocking your cells so they can absorb glucose from your blood and use it for energy.
Like insulin opens the door.
But as visceral adipose tissue expands and becomes dysfunctional, that pro-inflammatory environment physically alters the surface receptors on your muscle and liver cells.
I see. So instead of the old metaphor where the cells just like put on noise-canceling headphones and ignore the insulin, it's actually much more mechanical.
Very mechanical.
The inflammatory cytokines have essentially rusted the cellular keyhole. So the insulin key still fits into the lock, but because of the structural damage from the inflammation, the key won't turn.
That is exactly it. The door stays shut. That structural interference is the definition of insulin resistance.
Wow.
And your body, trying to survive, doesn't just shrug and give up. Your pancreas realizes the glucose isn't getting into the cells, so it attempts to force the issue.
It just sends more keys.
Right. It goes into overdrive, pumping out massive, abnormal amounts of insulin to try and push past that rusted lock.
And I imagine that just exhausts the system.
Completely. This hyperinsulinemia might keep your blood sugar balanced for a few years, but it places an immense strain on your entire metabolic framework.
Okay, the rusted lock makes perfect sense. But I have to push back here for a second because I'm looking at Dr. Yankelevici's research, and there is a massive biological contradiction sitting right in the middle of this text.
Ah, you're talking about leptin.
Yes, regarding leptin. Now, for anyone listening, leptin is our satiety hormone. It's the chemical signal that tells your brain, hey, we just ate a huge meal, the fuel tanks are full, you can stop eating now.
It is the master regulator of human energy balance.
Right. But the source says that as fat mass increases, leptin levels actually rise because the fat cells themselves are the ones manufacturing the leptin, right?
Right.
So if you are carrying excess visceral fat, your body is producing a literal tidal wave of leptin. It is screaming at your brain, I'm full, stop eating. So why do people with excess belly fat stay hungry?
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah. Why doesn't the body naturally self-correct and shut down the appetite?
It's a brilliant biological paradox, and the answer is leptin resistance. You have a tidal wave of leptin in the bloodstream, but those inflammatory cytokines we discussed earlier?
And panic tests.
Exactly. They physically interfere with the blood-brain barrier. The inflammation blocks the leptin from crossing into the hypothalamus, which is the part of the brain that controls hunger.
Wait, really? So the alarm is blaring at full volume, but the inflammatory static has literally severed the wire leading to the brain's speaker system.
That's a perfect way to put it. The wire is cut. Your brain registers an absence of leptin.
Oh, no.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, an absence of leptin means one thing to your brain: starvation.
Even though you have plenty of stored energy?
Yes. So even though your body is carrying excess energy, your brain triggers a starvation response. Your satiety signaling collapses. You feel persistently, agonizingly hungry.
That is just incredibly unfair.
It gets worse. Your brain also actively slows down your resting energy expenditure to conserve fuel.
Honestly, it takes so much guilt out of the equation for anyone struggling with this. People blame themselves for being hungry all the time.
They really do.
They think they just lack discipline or it's some moral failing, when actually they are fighting a severe physiological miscommunication. The wire is cut.
And we have to factor the stress response into this miscommunication too. Chronic stress triggers the release of cortisol,
Which we hear about all the time as the stress hormone.
Right. In short bursts, cortisol is entirely healthy, but chronic cortisol elevation specifically promotes central fat deposition.
So stress literally tells your body to build belly fat.
Yes, it signals your body to pack fat around your organs for quick evolutionary access. That new visceral fat worsens the inflammatory signaling, which worsens the leptin resistance, which increases your hunger and stress, creating a relentless biological loop.
Wow. Stress, appetite, and abdominal weight gain constantly feed one another.
Exactly.
So this rogue factory is hijacking our hunger, slowing our energy expenditure, and weaponizing our stress response.
Yeah.
But reading further into the source, the disruption cascades even deeper.
Oh, much deeper.
It gets into the very hormones that define our aging process and body composition. Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening.
Yeah, because visceral adipose tissue actively participates in steroid hormone metabolism. It contains an enzyme called aromatase.
Aromatase. Okay.
Aromatase is responsible for converting androgens, like testosterone, into estrogens.
Oh, wow.
So when you have a massive accumulation of visceral fat, you have a massive excess of aromatase activity. This alters the foundational hormone balance in both men and women.
This explains so much. If you've ever hit your 40s or 50s, maintained your exact same diet and gym routine, but watched your body composition shift anyway, you've experienced this endocrine disruption firsthand.
Oh, for sure.
You're eating the same salads, running the same miles, but suddenly you have this deep midlife fatigue and your waistline is expanding. It's not a lack of willpower. Your foundational hormones are literally being chemically scrambled by the aromatase in your belly fat.
The clinical literature maps this out clearly. In men, this aromatization leads to a drop in testosterone and an increase in estrogen.
Which probably causes more weight gain.
Exactly. It promotes even more abdominal fat storage and a loss of lean muscle. And in women, particularly around perimenopause, the shifts in estrogen handling by visceral fat exacerbate metabolic slowing and reproductive health issues.
It's just a vicious cycle.
It creates a state of systemic endocrine fatigue that a simple caloric deficit simply cannot fix.
Okay, so if this visceral fat is this destructive, if it's rusting our cellular locks, severing our hunger signals, and scrambling our sex hormones, the logical knee-jerk instinct for anyone is to eliminate it as fast as humanly possible.
Which makes sense.
Right. Cut your calories to zero, jump on the latest liquid crash diet, run on the treadmill until you pass out, shut the factory down immediately.
It is the most common reaction, and clinically speaking, it is one of the most dangerous things you can do to your body.
Really, why dangerous? If it's a factory manufacturing inflammation, aggressively tearing it down seems like the only rational move.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what adipose tissue is actually storing besides energy. Visceral fat acts as a biological safe box for fat-soluble compounds.
Okay.
In our modern world, this includes a massive array of environmental toxins. We are talking about endocrine disruptors from plastics, agricultural pesticides, heavy metals, industrial chemicals.
Anyway, so all the invisible chemical smog we breathe in, the pesticides on our food, the microplastics, our body has to put them somewhere.
Exactly. When your liver encounters a fat-soluble toxin that it cannot immediately process or safely excrete, it tucks that toxin away inside your fat cells. It shoves it into the visceral fat to keep it out of your bloodstream and away from your brain and your heart. It is a brilliant, desperate, protective mechanism.
I gotta say, I've fallen for the crash diet trap before.
Yeah.
I remember trying one of those extreme cleanses years ago.
Oh, the liquid ones?
Yeah. Just drinking water with maple syrup and cayenne pepper for days. I thought I was being so healthy, but by day 3, I had body aches, a splitting headache, and felt like I had the flu. Was that the toxins?
That is exactly what we call the toxic flu.
Wow.
When you force your body into extreme caloric restriction, you rapidly break down that fat tissue. You are essentially dynamiting the biological safe box.
Dynamiting it so everything spills out.
You release a flood of stored environmental toxins back into your systemic circulation far faster than your liver can possibly process them.
Oh my God. So by doing a crash diet, you are literally poisoning your own bloodstream from the inside out, just to force a piece of metal on the bathroom floor to display a smaller number.
That is the unseen reality of extreme, unsupported weight loss. When those toxins flood the system, it triggers a massive spike in systemic inflammation. It disrupts your immune signaling.
That's terrifying.
In susceptible individuals, this intense physiological stress can trigger immune dysregulation or even unmask underlying autoimmune conditions. The liver just becomes completely overwhelmed.
That reframes everything. It highlights exactly why a simple bathroom scale is an archaic and honestly dangerous metric for health.
Absolutely.
You could be losing 5 pounds a week, cheering every time you step on the scale, but biologically, your liver is drowning, your immune system is in panic mode, and you are baiting your organs in stored industrial chemicals.
Which is precisely why Dr. Ian Kilovici and the Morrell Institute argue that treating abdominal fat requires a completely different clinical paradigm. The objective isn't cosmetic weight loss.
Right.
The objective is to dismantle the tissue in a way that respects the complexity of human detoxification. If the medical conversation stays focused entirely on the scale, it fundamentally fails the patient.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We have a biological hostage situation here. We need to shut down the rogue factory because it's causing insulin resistance and hormone chaos. But if we blow it up too fast with a crash diet, we flood the body with toxic waste.
Right.
How do we actually fix this safely? That brings us directly to the clinical solution detailed in the source, which Dr. Yankelovich calls the Morel method.
Yes, the Morel method. It represents a transition from treating the symptom to treating the system. They use the term metabolic refinement.
Metabolic refinement, I like that.
It is a clinician-guided metabolic reset designed to slowly improve cellular signaling, support lean muscle mass, and address the actual endocrine dysfunction driving the fat accumulation.
Right, because if you don't fix the underlying signaling, if you don't repair the rusted insulin locks and the severed leptin wires, the rogue factory is just going to rebuild itself the second you eat a normal meal again.
Exactly. For appropriate clinical candidates, the source outlines the integration of specific medical technologies like Vanquish ME and AccuFit combination treatments, and these are deployed very intentionally.
I want to dig into those because on the surface, someone might hear those brand names and think, oh, that's just cosmetic fat sapping.
Sure, that's a common misconception.
But the source frames these tools as structural and regenerative refinement. What is the actual biology of how a tool like Vanquish ME dismantles the fat without causing that toxic flood we just talked about?
Great question. So Vanquish ME utilizes selective non-contact radiofrequency energy. It specifically targets and heats the adipose tissue layer without physically touching the skin or affecting the surrounding muscle.
Okay.
This controlled thermal energy induces apoptosis, which is the programmed natural death of the fat cell.
Programmed cell death. So instead of a violent explosion from a crash diet, it's more like a controlled demolition.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because the breakdown is gradual, occurring over several weeks, the body's lymphatic system can clear the cellular debris, and the liver can process any released compounds at a safe, natural pace.
You bypass the toxic flood.
Exactly. And simultaneously, they use AccuFit, which employs targeted electromuscular stimulation to engage and build lean muscle tissue.
And building muscle isn't just about looking toned. Muscle is your body's biggest metabolic engine, right? It's a massive sink for glucose.
Absolutely.
By building up that muscle, you're actively helping to repair those rusted insulin locks. You're increasing your baseline metabolic rate, so your body is burning more energy just sitting still.
It's an intervention viewed entirely through a longevity lens. It is about restoring balance across the interconnected systems that govern how we function, adapt, and age.
Which is so much smarter than just starving yourself.
But from a clinical psychology standpoint, perhaps the most fascinating tool integrated into this method is the ageless AI wellness assessment.
Yes, the AI visualization. Yeah. Because trying to explain metabolic health or leptin resistance to a patient can sound incredibly abstract. It just sounds like bad news from a doctor.
Exactly. The ageless AI tool bridges the gap between abstract clinical data and the patient's daily reality. It visualizes body composition patterns and runs projected outcomes based on different treatment trajectories.
When you can actually look at a screen and see the trajectory of your current physiology, when you visually map out where the visceral fat is located and see the data proving it's an active threat, it completely shifts your mindset.
It really does.
You aren't just blindly stepping on a scale and feeling ashamed. You have a transparent, highly specific map of your own biology. You can literally see the rogue factory, and you can see the clinician-guided strategy required to dismantle it safely. It gives the patient their agency back.
Transparency creates compliance and understanding. When addressed with that level of clinical precision, reducing visceral fat transforms from a cosmetic vanity project into a critical medical intervention.
Right.
You are actively preventing the accelerated aging, the hormonal decay, and the chronic cardiovascular disease that this inflammatory tissue guarantees.
We have covered some incredibly deep physiological ground today.
Yeah.
To wrap this all up, the biggest takeaway for you listening is to give yourself some profound grace, but also to get incredibly serious about how your body operates.
Absolutely.
Your belly fat is not a passive storage unit. It is a highly active, hormone-disrupting organ. It is aggressively breaking your hunger signals, scrambling your sex hormones, and silently storing a lifetime of environmental toxins.
Yeah, treating it requires precision, medical patience, and a deep respect for your own complex biology, not just a brutal restrictive caloric deficit that leaves you inflamed, starving, and toxic.
It requires upgrading the hardware, not just trying to empty the trash.
I love that phrasing. But looking back at the breadth of Dr. Yankelovich's research, there is one specific concept that I keep turning over in my mind, and it raises a fascinating, almost philosophical question about human biology.
Oh, I like where this is going. What is the lingering question?
Well, we established earlier that the liver pushes fat-soluble environmental toxins into visceral adipose tissue to protect the bloodstream, right?
Right. The fat acts as a biological safe box, the
Yeah.
toxic waste dump that we don't want to blow up.
Exactly. So if we look at human health strictly through that lens, we have to wonder, in our heavily industrialized modern world where we are constantly exposed to microplastics, pesticides, and chemical disruptors, is the body's stubborn refusal to burn belly fat truly a metabolic failure?
Wait,
Or is it actually a highly successful, desperate defense mechanism? Is your biology fiercely holding on to that visceral fat because it knows that your liver simply isn't equipped to survive the toxic load of our modern environment all at once?
whoa, that entirely flips the script. The stubborn belly fat that you've been fighting for years might actually be the very thing working overtime to save your life.
It is a biological possibility that demands we completely reframe our relationship with our own bodies.
Mm.
And we aren't fighting our biology. We are trying to survive an environment our biology wasn't built for.
That is a wild, incredibly empowering thought. I want you to really mull over that idea today. Think about how hard your body is working behind the scenes to protect you, and why it absolutely deserves a tailored, precise approach to longevity, not just a quick fix for beach season.
Beautifully said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the surface, and we will see you next time.